Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for February 13th, 2026. Today, I'm going to be discussing the ongoing Epstein affair. I've been getting numerous calls as I've just published the part 3 of what was Jeffrey Epstein really. And it's becoming more clear as each of these email drops are coming out with more and more documents that we were right from the beginning, that this is not about Epstein as a sexual pervert, although that's a part of who he was. And it's more about the environment and the culture in which he was allowed to operate, not just as a collector and abuser of young women and girls, but as a financial genius, so-called, who is part of the transformation of the physical economy of humanity from a production process for sustaining human life to instead a control process of an imperial power. That is the power of the oligarchy of the City of London. Now, I was watching earlier a bit of an interview that he did with Steve Bannon. Bannon apparently has many, many hours of talks with Epstein. And you see Bannon feeding his ego, talking about what a financial genius he is. But here's the point. He was no financial genius. He was playing with the money of the house. He was an operative set up by organized crime, and organized crime that had taken over sections of the so-called legitimate financial community. And if he lost money, it was no problem. It could be written off. If he made money, it was deployed for the sake of continuing the control of the existing establishment over governments and over people. The whole idea of the Great Reset was the idea of central banks as private institutions running the world economy in a financial dictatorship based on policies not determined by elected governments, but by technocrats who answer to the corporate cartels and their billionaire owners. That's what Epstein was all about. And you can see in his discussion with Bannon that the two of them are focused on money, the question of making money. And you see the corruption from that standpoint. And look, as these emails are coming out, these documents are coming out, there's a growing rebellion in the world, a recognition that the world is being governed by a bunch of greedy lunatics who actually believe that human beings are animals. And the stories that are coming out are starting to include some of the names of the people sitting at the top, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Bill Gates, the people of that sort, along with their operatives such as Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. And so as we're seeing this unfold, we're seeing an interesting thing going on in London, a rebellion against the City of London. And that's because they have rigged the system there, again, for the billionaires and for a situation where there will be permanent war. The whole idea is that you save the system by distracting people from what's causing their problems, who's looting them, who's determining who's an enemy and who's a friend. And in the meantime, the establishment is able to keep the system going. And that's what we're watching right now. You know, who is Epstein? Where did his money come from? The organized crime networks that were part of Michael Milken's junk bond empire, then later the mortgage-backed securities, derivatives operations, where millions, if not billions, are won or lost in an hour of speculation. And if they're lost, who ends up paying? The people. And if the money comes in, it's used to continue the illusion that there are some bad people we have to fight, and the main thing is to just keep doing your job and keep your head down. And that's who employed Epstein and ran his operation. Meanwhile, politics are something like the World Wrestling Federation. We saw that with the Pam Bondi hearings yesterday. Now, strategic policy, that is the relationship among nations, is under the control of geopoliticians, people like Brzezinski, like Henry Kissinger, like Antony Blinken. This is who ran Biden, people like Bolton and Pompeo. They don't look at human beings as creative creatures in the image of God. They look at human beings as movable pieces and exploitable entities. And they see man as a creature of animal behavior characteristics, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, what Bentham called the hedonistic calculus. This is British radical philosophy. And you see human beings in that way. Find their vulnerabilities, find their weaknesses, find their fears, and scare them with their fears, and then give them a little bit of comfort. You can get people to respond to force or to bribes. Now, what am I describing? Well, this is the Hobbesian, the use of force, the Leviathan, the powerful figure who tells you what to do, the authoritarian state, versus the deal maker, the one who will make a deal with you to give you a certain bit of escape from the beast man. But that's how you train animals, not human beings. And this is the difference between the British system, which is coming apart now. We see it with the Blair operation that was put in place when Tony Blair left office. You have people like Peter Mandelson, like McSweeney, the people who are running the Starmer government. And what are they doing? They're committed to permanent war the same way Blair was. A privatized economic system where the wealth goes to the few and the pain goes to the many. And this is the system they're setting up. It's in place. It controls most governments. But this is not the American system. This is the British Imperial system. Those who want to take exception to me for that and say Britain's washed up and no longer controls anything, look at the debates going on now in the House of Commons. What are they talking about? The whole question that was brought up 2 days ago by Jeremy Corbyn, who is a victim of the Blair offensive back in the 2007 to 2010 period. Corbyn asked the question, why do we tolerate Palantir, the company that's part of the deep state, that's a military operation and a surveillance operation with Peter Thiel? Why do we tolerate these instruments that have nothing to do with government and statecraft and the improvement of the general welfare? So you have to understand that the fight here is British radical philosophy of this sort of Adam Smith, Jeremy Bentham, Hobbes and Locke, versus the American founding fathers of Franklin and Hamilton and John Quincy Adams, who referred back to Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz and who prized the happiness of man as the goal of the state, as opposed to the accruing of property and power based on property. Might versus might makes right. Now, and happiness comes from acceptance of your mortality. What am I going to do with my creativity, and my freedom to leave the world a better place than I found when I entered it? And Lyndon LaRouche always referred to a cartoon in the New Yorker magazine that he thought summarized this perfectly. It's a man sitting up in his coffin before he goes into the ground after he's died. And he looks around and he says, what was that all about? And that's the question we have to ask as we're living this life. What am I doing here? What's my purpose? Is it to accrue sexual experiences and money and food and drugs? Or is it to act for the interests of the future of a better mankind? And that's what we must be inspired to think about by real political leaders. not the jokers that we have today in most of the world. So statecraft should be oriented to answer that question. Now, to do that, you have to have an understanding of the relationship between the development of the human mind and the human creativity in children and the future increase in the physical productive power of man. You want to increase the productive power of labor, and that requires science, the ability to use scientific discovery to create technological advance, to increase consumption of good quality food, of health care, of housing, of the things that are needed to give people the comfort to develop their creativity and to engage in a process of deliberation as to what will improve the conditions for all mankind in the period ahead, 1 or 2 generations. That's LaRouchian economics. And this is not about money. It's not about individual power. It's not about which country is number one and the strongest. It's about how do we advance as a human civilization to take on the problems of disease and the questions of mortality. We're all going to die at some point. What do we do with our life to make sure that we don't waste the potential that's given to us by the Creator? And so that's what the Epstein affair is all about. Not about a character who's interested in controlling people by using their sense perception. And this is what Epstein was all about. How do you intimidate people or bribe them or offer them inducements to do what he wants? And because he had the power behind him of a coordinated network of organized crime, of state power, and by that I mean police and intelligence and so on. Because he had that, he was able to appear to be a Superman in control of the processes of economic development. He was nothing of the sort. He was a cipher. He was someone who was put there to give people the wrong impression about what gives you power and happiness. Now that we know that, and this is what we said in the beginning, when people were marveling at how Epstein was doing this, we said it's not Epstein, it's the system. The system is collapsing, and the people who run the system are using Epstein and people like him to preserve their power and to keep you in a subservient position. And what we said about that was exactly right. It's the oligarchy that's the problem. And these are the ones who are pushing for central bank dictatorships, wars, austerity, and so on. And their goal is to increase the buying power of the billionaires and to keep the rest of the population desperate enough that they'll engage in a life which is a fight of each against all. Now, today at 11 a.m., Friday at 11 a.m., we'll have another call of the International Peace Coalition. It will include discussion of these kinds of things, how nations must work together, and what the Epstein project was all about. I'll be participating in that discussion. I really encourage you to watch what the more intelligent people around the world are watching. The dialogue between Helga Tepp-LaRouche and top officials from all countries on how we establish a world in which sovereign nations act for the benefit of their own population. That's the fight that the Founding Fathers had. That's what brought them together to write the Declaration of Independence 250 years ago. And that's what we have to do to commemorate that anniversary by putting our country and all countries on the right track toward working together for a new security and development architecture. So hopefully I'll see you later today on the International Peace Conference call.